Welcome back, everybody. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Philip Himberg. I am the artistic director of the Sundance Institute Theater Program, and we're here to tell you another remarkable story from another side of the world. Thank you. Part of the Sundance Institute mandate is to support artists around the globe. And in our film, new media, and theater programs, we have a group of initiatives that embrace a true world of storytelling. We invite international artists to our labs in our home in Utah and around the US, and we have workshops and labs abroad as well. In the theater program, we spent 12 years in the area of East Africa. In fact, there are two artists who are here at the conference, Odile Kateze and Hope Azeda, who are from Rwanda, who were part of our fellows, alumni, when we were in East Africa. And all of our programs, I want you to know, are co-led by arts managers from the regions. So in East Africa, over 12 years, that was led by Asimwe Deborah, who now runs the Kampala International Theater Festival. And then we turned our attentions in the last 3 or 4 years to artists working in the Arabic language. And that meant from North Africa and the Middle East and the diaspora community in Europe and in the US. I'm gonna show you now a 5-minute video of the work of the Sundance Institute Theater Program. One of our programs is to have a lab in Morocco, in Marrakesh, and the last one was in 2016, and the next one comes up next month, May 2018. So for a look at our program, please roll the video.
Sundance Institute. It's mostly known for this, but it also hosts year-round labs for artists of various disciplines around the world. Most recently, the theater program packed up and shipped off to Morocco to establish an environment of creative engagement between American and Middle Eastern North African artists. Sundance sent a team to document the lab. Here's what they saw.
Sequestered here on this campus are people from 20 different countries. So we're sequestered, but we're sequestered in an incredibly international environment.
احنا الآن في مختبر الساندانس لتطوير العرض ليجعله انه يخرج الى النور مع جروب فنانين من مختلف العالم.
In the last 4, 5, 6 years, there's been so much shifting in this area of the world. And where that was happening, I imagined that there was a group of young theater makers, whether they be writers or directors or choreographers or musicians, who were responding to that change and creating new work.
A lot of the projects here are about serious global issues, right? Like the war in Syria or Lebanon, or the plight of African American women in the United States. So I've also been very aware of sort of the importance and the bravery of the community here, and really made me feel like that my play has something to contribute to that.
Artists are able to focus on what they need to. So it's a sacred space that is protected not only by being removed from an urban setting and placed next to nature, but it is also removed from any commercial pressure that might exist on artist or a project. So artists are not exposed to producers coming in to shop their work, or to the public who might be paying a ticket price and having a certain expectation.
الفكرة اختلاف الثقافات أو الاختلاف الخلفيات يلي جايين منها المشتركين المختلفين أكيد بتغني الشغل، ولكن ما بعتقد بس من وراء مبدأ الهوية والانتماء لثقافة معينة، بل هي لطبيعة انتماء كل شخص لإشكاليات سياسية واجتماعية مختلفة.
We have 11 projects. 5 of them are projects by American writers, and 5 are projects by MENA writers, and 1 is by a Ugandan author.
مشروعي بلش بال 2014 بفترة كان فيها قنابل تفجيرات أو بالأحرى انتحارية بلبنان، والمشكل إنه كان هيدا أول مرة بنشوف مثل طريقة هيدا العنف.
Eve's song is about a middle-class African-American family in the States, and their house is being haunted by the spirits of dead black women, dead black girls, and dead black trans women that have been murdered by the police.
The Treasurer is a very intimate play about the very complicated, ridiculous process of aging and dying in a certain section of American life right now.
فكرة المشروع بالأساس هي عن الناس اللي ضلوا بسوريا بغض النظر إن كانوا نساء أو رجال. سوريا بالفترة الأخيرة تصورت كبلد فاضي تماماً وما فيه حياة. بس في ناس لساتهم موجودين ولساتهم عايشين برغم كل ظروفهم الصعبة وأخذوا خيار إنه ما بدهم يسافروا.
There's something in our DNA that wants to gather in a space and hear story. By getting outside of our own borders, by having to engage in ways that sometimes might be uncomfortable, to be thrown off balance as an artist can only result in a product or a play or a piece of art that truly reflects the world in which we live. For too long, our nation has been known by our military presence in the region, and the artists have not been able to show up. And Sundance hopes to bridge that gap and to create opportunities for that space in between the conflict zones, the space in between artistic processes, the space in between the US and other parts of the world, make that possible.
Thank you. Raida Taha came to playwriting a little later than some others. She's also an actor, an remarkable actor, and I first saw her work at the DCAF Festival in Cairo, which Ahmad Al-Attar, who is also here, is the artistic director of. She was later in a play by a Damascus-based writer at our lab in Morocco. But it's her own writing that Sundance came to present, and I'm sorry, not present, but develop over the last few years. She's performed this piece that's coming up in many, many countries, most recently in Bahrain to great acclaim, and in Beirut, around the world, and in Europe. I want to say that we really deeply believe that artists should write in and speak in the language in which they dream. And Raida's language is Arabic. But for the purposes of today, she has offered to do a portion of her piece, it's about 45 minutes, in English for you. And it is called, Where Will I Find Someone Like You, Ali? Please give a warm welcome to Raida Taha.
Thank you, Philip. Good evening, everybody. I'm very excited to be reading this controversial piece. In Arabic, it's called ألاقي زيك فين يا علي? Where would I find someone like you, Ali? And I have to say that it is a very popular Egyptian song that my mother and my aunt repeated over the years. The orphans. I was woken up by my mother's screams that day. I was 7. I got up and I ran to her. I found her in the kitchen, holding a newspaper and standing on a chair. It was a white chair. Saeed! She would scream and then jump down from the chair and then climb up again and scream, Saeed! Saeed was the concierge of our building, the one who brought up the newspapers every morning. The newspaper fell from her hand as she called out for him again, Saeed! Saeed! The doorbell rang, and in rushed the neighbors. Fathiye, my mother, screamed and cried and beat her head, and with her screams, my sisters and I also began to scream and cry. What else do children do at the sight of a parent seized by grief and terror? She screamed and we screamed. We were terrified. We didn't know what was happening, only that it was transforming our mother and our environment. Our neighbor, Afaf, took us to our room and closed the door. From there, too, we could hear her screaming. And so we too went on crying. Suddenly, our house was full of people. There was such a commotion, so much shouting that I couldn't hear my mother screaming anymore. And so I calmed down as if it was a call and response between the lioness and her cubs. But when I heard her scream again, not long after, I had to go to her. So I ran out and stood by the door of the sitting room. I looked at her but couldn't come nearer. She looked at me and screamed. It was then that I saw some woman descend upon her, hold her down from her hands. No, please. For God's sake, leave it, she said. Ali liked it. Please don't remove it. I swear, it's too early. Leave me alone. And then one woman, whose voice I still recall, said, No, my dear Nidal, Mom's name. No red nail polish. You're the wife of a martyr now, dear. On that day of wailing and lamentation, they sent me and my sister off to school. We took the newspaper from the concierge and went to see Mr. Hassan, the principal of our school, which was attached to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine and was located in Burj al-Barajni refugee camp in Lebanon. Ali, my father, had insisted we should be educated at Popular Front School. We went into Mr. Hassan's office and I put the newspaper on his desk. I asked him, what does a heroic martyr mean? He looked at us and replied, oh, a martyr is someone who dies for the sake of what he loves most. For example, he dies for love of Palestine. So it means Ali loves Palestine more than he loves me, I asked. He froze. Does a martyr come back? I asked. Mr. Hassan took the newspaper and opened it. He hugged us and then began to cry. As we left the office, my sister said, and we were really, really little, 7 and 8, I know why Mr. Hassan was crying. It's because he's jealous of Daddy. When we went home, cars were blocking our street. The entire block was crowded, and from the door of our building and all the way up the stairs, it was jammed with people. The elevator was even packed. We couldn't pass through. And all of a sudden, young men were carrying us, shouting, make way, they're the daughters of the martyr, make way, before setting us down at the door of our house. Is this our house? The door had never been left open like this before. Inside, people in black everywhere. We hardly knew anyone as the sound of men cursing, women weeping and tearing their hair out swirled around us. The tables in the sitting room and the dining room were covered with newspapers and large photos of Ali. There was no place for us to put our backpacks. I went to the kitchen to drink but couldn't squeeze through. It was full of coffee pots and overturned coffee cups and ashtrays overflowing with cigarette butts, cigarettes and ash all the way to the ceiling. The place reeked of smoke and sweat and coffee. I didn't see either my little sister Susu or baby Mace. Every once in a while, people would hug us and cry and cry. We couldn't understand the reason for all this crying. My mom sat on the couch, surrounded by people. She did not greet us, didn't speak to us, give us lunch, or help with our homework. So we stayed at the neighbors that night and many nights thereafter, where we'd play and study and sleep over. Mom had never before allowed us to sleep at anyone's house. And when we'd go home, we'd find Mom still sitting on that same couch. There she was, day and night. At least it was a treat, to be able to go to sleep without having a bath. We were at the neighbor's house when he arrived. Some young man came and carried us home and put us like this in front of him. Oh my God. I recognized him right away. He was the man who used to visit Ali at night. My mom told me he was called Abu Ammar Yasser Arafat. He started. Come, little darlings, come. Come, he said, holding our little hands. He sat all three of us on his lap and kissed our hands. I am now your father, my darlings. I shall take care of you. I need courageous girls. And you, my little princess, what do you want to be when you grow up? An astronaut, I answered. He said, great! You shall be the Valentina Tereshkova of Palestine when we return. And you? He asked my second sister. I don't know yet, she answered. My third sister, who was 4 years old and at that time, answered, I want my daddy. Abu Ammar hugged her. And like all those who hugged us then, he too began to cry. We were then taken back to the neighbor's house, leaving the adults to fill our home with serious conversations and the smoke that accompanied them. Years later, and when I insisted, Fathiya, my mother, told me about her life after Ali. Friends and neighbors dwindled. They dwindled. The women feared for their husband from me, and the men kept ogling me and making masked advances. That's why I withdrew from all mixed company. The house would empty, and just a few would remain, pretending to condole. And by then, I would be sedated, having swallowed one pill after another, throughout the endless day. Invariably, the last to remain would draw close and give me some bullshit line about how Palestine needs us to sacrifice and be patient, or Jaffa cannot be liberated without armed struggle. But I can't decide whether your eyes are green or honey-colored. Oh, baby, your hair color is natural. I never saw a more beautiful dark tan. Life must go on, and our path is long. A beautiful woman like you, a beautiful young woman like you must get on with her life. Have any dream you want at night, and I'll make it come true by day. Revolutions need blood. Your girls, I shall place in my eyes. All this said as he devoured my tits with his eyes. Revolutionary my ass. After Ali was martyred, my mother transferred us from the Najah school in Burj al-Barajne, attached to the Popular Front, to a school called École de l'Espérance. Later, she decided she wouldn't understand us if we spoke French. So she moved us again, this time to the Rawda High School, where the headmaster was Mr. Qaisar Haddad, brother of Wadi' Haddad. Wadi' and Ali, my father, were friends and colleagues. When in the 70s, 4 aircraft were hijacked and flown to the Revolution Airport. At least, she said, here was a common history of aircraft hijacking, a better bet as a school, you know. With time, life became sweeter. People would pass by, bring us presents, take us on outings, buy us new clothes. Yasser Arafat would come and play with us, especially on feast days, which opened the door to find presents, piled, clothes and toys, free subscriptions to beach clubs and free doctors' appointments. I know. Such pampering, enough to stop the heart with joy. Everyone was jealous of us being daughters of a martyr. All the kids wanted to be like us. Soon, some of them got their wish. With the increase of massacres and assassinations and the frequent military operations, the numbers of martyrs' children grew. From 1972 onwards, in fact, they could barely keep up with the children of martyrs, to the point where they created an institution, the Families of Martyrs Institution, and founded a school for us, which was given the unfortunate name of the Happy Childhood School. Lord, how happy all these kids were without mothers or fathers. Special trips were sometimes organized for these lucky, happy half-orphans to visit the cities of Eastern and Western Europe. I once had a childhood friend called Simsim. Her father was a Fatah official, and she would pester him. Dad, the daughters of Nidal get to go on these trips. Can I join them? No, my dear. Her father would reply, you're not a martyr's daughter. You can't go. Then one day my mom woke us up. Wake up, girls, and told us to get dressed. We're off to visit Simsim. The Mossad had assassinated her father in Cyprus. And as we entered the house, right in the middle of the crying and screaming and the horrific scenes that we knew all too well, stood Simsim smiling. My wish has come true. She said, now I can travel with you. And she did. We would go on trips together to represent Palestine and perform Dabke. This is a Kalashnikov. ضل سلاحي بجراحي يا ثورتنا ضل سلاحي ولا يمكن قوة في الدنيا تنزع من ايد سلاحي ضل سلاحي بجراحي يا ثورتنا ضل سلاحي ولا يمكن قوة في الدنيا تنزع من ايد سلاحي هي ضل سلاحي ضل سلاحي هي دربي مر دربك مر ادعس فوق طلوعي ومر دربي مر ودربك مر وادعس فوق طلوعي ومر دربي مر دربك مر ادعس فوق طلوعي ومر دربي مر ودربك مر ادعس فوق طلوعي ايوه هي قديش هذا الشعب الثاء ضحى وقدم ليعيش حر ضل سلاحي ضل سلاحي هي Our group grew and grew. A new face every week, it seemed. It was no small deal to be the daughter of a martyr. In fact, Simsim's luck was so powerful that she eventually became not just the daughter, but the wife of a martyr as well. What luck. Come along, girls. Quick. We need to go home. Each time Fathiye took us to the Sanaya garden, we'd hardly have arrived and placed our feet on our bike pedals. She'd go out, come on, let's go. Or come on, let's visit so-and-so. Come on, we must get back. Let's go back home, come on. And so we'd return home disgruntled. She was in a hysterical state, my mother. At the time, many people had told her that Ali was alive, being held in an underground prison in Israel. So she had this crazy notion that he would come home during one of our absences. that he was sitting on the stairs waiting for us with no key to let himself in. And when she'd find he wasn't there, as was always the case, she'd start blaming herself for changing the lock on the door, even though it had been broken. So, when did she know? How did she know that Ali had in fact been martyred? What with these empty coffins in Beirut and the rumors of him being imprisoned in some underground dungeon, I found my mom in Amman one day to find out the answer. Mom, I wanted to ask you, how did you finally know for sure that Dad was martyred? Not now, please, later. I'll tell you tomorrow. She hung up. My mother hung up on me. But the next day she calls me back and jumps right in, not even a hello. I knew because one day I spoke to your aunt Suhaila in Jerusalem and she told me the bad news. They had discovered that Ali's body was being kept in a morgue in a refrigerated drawer and the Israelis were refusing to hand it over. She continued. The news was devastating. And just like that, I suddenly woke up. I began dreaming of him at night. He was telling me, Fataya, I'm cold. Fataya, get me out of here so you and I and the girls can go back to Jerusalem. Fataya, let's go back and pick the fruit from that fig tree. Let me out of here.
فتحية بردان. طلعيني من هون عشان أروح أنا وإنتي والبنات على بيتنا. فتحية يلا عشان نرجع على القدس. يلا عشان نلقط الدينة. طلعوني.
My aunt Suhaila is nobody's fool. She's also illiterate, though you wouldn't know it. And she's memorized the content of every clipping of every article. This paper tells about the time I saw Kurt Waldheim. This one when I sent a letter to Golda Meir. This one when I went to the Red Cross damn liars to ask about your father. Let me see. Yes. This is when all the newspapers wrote about me and the American Secretary of State. She made me a glass of tea with sage and began her tale. When I learned that your dad was in a refrigerator, I took a vow upon myself not to cover myself summer or winter until I'd removed him from where he was and buried him properly. Early one morning, as I was kneading dough with Dawlat, my daughter-in-law, the radio pipes up. I jumped up, I washed up my hands, dressed and ran outside. Ever since the day your father left us, there was a fire in my heart, Heked, which never went out. A fire that waved its flames back and forth at me like this, Heked. I said to Dawlat, give your father-in-law his breakfast and tell him I'm off to see him. I stopped a taxi and told him, take me to Jaffa Street to the office of Felicia Langer. Do you know her? She asked me. I said, oh yes. She is the lawyer who defends Palestinian prisoners. I found Felicia's office and said to her, Felicia, Kissinger is here and I am off to see him. Felicia says, go, my dear. And if you don't get to see him, we will go to La Haye, The Hague. So I said goodbye to Felicia and continued on to the offices of Sha'b newspaper. There was a young fellow there called Ahmed who used to help me write letters in Arabic and English. So I said to him, I want a letter in English which I want to hand to Kissinger, and another letter in Arabic which you will print in your newspaper as a story. I am now off to see him. I went down to the street, stopped another taxi. The sun was beating down on my head. And I told him to take me to the American consulate, where I found a vast number of people standing in line. So I stood in line until my turn came. I was drenched with sweat. I now found myself facing a woman in a glass booth. Hello, sister. Peace upon you. Is Kissinger here? She started laughing, the little twerp. No, my dear, Kissinger is in Mamella. Next. I swear to you, my dear, I didn't know what Mamella was. At that moment, I glimpsed my brother Tahir's car. That's your uncle. And hear him shouting, Suhaila! What are you doing here alone without your husband and children? I couldn't believe my luck. Please take me to Mamella. And by the way, what is Mamella? He frowned. Good God, you want to go there and you don't know what it is? Mamella is a 5-star hotel in Jewish Jerusalem. Kissinger is there, and I want to go see him. What do you want to see him for? He shouted. What? You're afraid I'd kill him? I just want to deliver a letter. Look, just drive me there, please. And all the way there, my dear, your uncle kept saying, I swear they will give you the dead person and take us in his place. Here is the hotel. I can't park here. It's forbidden. Suhaila, what you're about to do is men's work. Men's work? Imagine. And you know what I replied, my dear? I said, and where are the men, Tahir? Show me, where are the men? I don't see any men here. And I slammed the car door in his silly face like this. You know, my dear, I felt so humiliated. So tired of them and their excuses. Every time I'd say to your uncles, where is your brother? Why don't you ask about him? They'll say, oh, it's done. Tomorrow they'll give him back to you. Oh, and I'd say, who will give him back to you? Who? My aunt's obsession about burying her brother was really bizarre. My dear, the Israelis are on one breed and your uncles are another. The Israelis are one breed and your uncles are another. So, I tidied my hair, wrapped my scarf around, shook out my dress, and entered the hotel. The security guard frisked me. And would you believe it? Right at the entrance, by some stroke of luck, I found one of your dad's fellow tour guides, Sabra, from the days when he was a guide in Jerusalem. I said to him, peace upon you. Do you still remember me? I am Muhammad, sister of Ali Taha. He came out from behind his desk and began laughing. And then he said, Muhammad. And you know, my dear, how these Jerusalemites speak. Muhammad, can it be? What are you doing here? Those were the days, no, with the tourist groups and the old city. You know, Ali would say to me always, you take the Brits and I'll take the Germans. I can't stand the Brits. They are the cause of all our misfortunes. What a loss, your brother. What can I do for you, Muhammad? Kissinger is here, Yahi, and I want to see him. Wow, just like that. Kissinger? That should be a breeze. I want to see him in person. I want my brother Ali. I want my brother Ali, and I want my brother Ali, and a letter won't do. Muhammad, you're in luck. Here is the American attaché as we speak, and the other one with him is the military attaché. And he goes chasing after them and says, sir, and he babbles in English to him. The man began shouting at him, and he comes back. Kissinger does not meet Arabs. I'm sorry. What? And you should have seen me, my dear, charging at the Americans. And before I could even finish my plea, the Americans started shouting at me too. Who are you? What do you want? What are you doing here? If you have a letter, give it to me and go, go, go. It turned out the fellow could speak Arabic. I tell you, they're all spies. Listen, I said, I will not hand the letter to anyone except him in person. I then added, do you know my brother Ali Taha? Do you know him? I bet he knew him. Ali is my brother, a gentle person, with a constant smile on his face. Come, Sabra. Sabra, come and translate. What did he do? He hijacked a small plane to Lud Airport. But his motive was humanitarian. He only wanted Israelis to free prisoners that were rotting away in their prisons. 100 of them, all of whom were his friends. Some of them were sick. And they killed him for that. Barak and Netanyahu killed him, God damn them. They tricked him, and he fell for their trick, being a decent man, human being. The moment I said all that, they went wild. And they kept repeating like parrots. All meetings are strictly forbidden. All meetings are strictly forbidden. Facing him, I said, listen you. Come Sabra and translate. Without further ado, I am a mother of 9 girls and boys. I brought them all to Jerusalem. And the time has come for justice. I am ready to spend the rest of my life either in prison or in the empty grave I have dug for Ali. You pick. They walked away repeating that phrase. All meetings are strictly forbidden. Then they up the stairs. And I, my dear, followed stealthily behind. I said, and what about Sabra? What did he do? Oh, he pretended to ignore it all, bless him. He's your dad's friend and can recognize justice when he sees it. But he can also recognize when to keep his distance. The Americans entered a room. I knocked on the door. A young woman opened. When I said, peace upon you, is Kissinger here? She shouted, no, and shook her head left and right. I said to myself, why on earth are they all like this? Some say it's forbidden. Others say, no. What is it I am asking of them? They've all gone crazy. Suddenly, a man came out from another room, and I recognized him. So I shouted at the top of my lungs, hey, you, Kissinger, come. Don't be afraid. Come. Kissinger, come. And he came. He came over and stood between me and the young woman. His eyes were about to pop. Blue they were. Very blue. I told him, listen, translate. You, woman, translate. My brother is a martyr, and they've had him in a refrigerator for the past 2 years. Each human being has the right to bury and be buried. I wrote you 2 letters, and you did not respond, Kissinger. Here is my 3rd. Take it. This is inhuman. I only want my brother. I said, did you really speak like that to Kissinger? Yes, my dear, if you have right on your side, you fear nothing. Kissinger then patted on my shoulder and said, okay. I returned to Silwan, tired and aching, and went straight to sleep. I will never forget that day, my dear. A Monday in June at 12 noon, the day before, I'd prepared a Palestinian flag, large and beautiful, which I sewed, washed, cleaned, wrapped up, and placed inside an empty bottle of perfume and hid in my handbag. It was illegal to possess the flag then. You'll go to prison 1 year. Please, Adnan, I want a sharp blade. He didn't even ask me why. Done, mother. I took a cold bath, prayed all night, and slept while standing at the door of our house. I was ready and lost in thought, carrying the handbag every little while. I checked its contents. The very first Allahu Akbar filled the sky above Jerusalem. I came nearer to the door, and people started coming like the waves of the sea. Apart from my children and brothers, there were more strangers than kin, cars and buses following one another, all of them following us to Hebron. When we arrived, I could barely believe there were so many. I could barely squeeze my way into the municipality building to see Sheikh Ja'bari. Muhammad, he called out, come and sit next to me, near me. I went over, my eyes sparkling with anger, and didn't even look at his face. What's the matter, Muhammad? I want to pray over my dead brother in the Ibrahimi mosque and open the coffin to make sure it's him. Oh, it's your right to open the coffin. But the Ibrahimi mosque has been surrounded since dawn by the Israeli military. It's out of the question. Allahu Akbar, greater is he than you and the Israelis. And the mosque is not my right? And where am I supposed to pray over my brother, huh? Tell me. I swear by Ali's soul and his eternal sleep, if the Israelis hand him over and take my brothers, I will vow to become a servant and washerwoman in their homes in order to feed their kids and wives, and will raise them to rebel against their injustice and yours. I left the municipality and went to the cemetery. My dear, I found the people of Hebron, the West Bank, and Palestine waiting for your father. Journalists were everywhere, and their bloody soldiers were stationed on rooftops and on the ground, their helicopters hovering above, and tanks below, roses and garlands and cameras and rifles everywhere. I went up to where the men were sitting, and I said, men, today is the wedding day of my brother Ali. I don't want to hear any weeping, wailing, or head beating. Today is his wedding day, huh? I sat on a chair near the small ornamental fountain, and then I started sweating. What if they don't bring him at all? They lie to everyone. So why wouldn't they lie to me? At noon, military truck arrived covered with camouflage and packed with soldiers. They leaped out, scattered, and surrounded the area, and one soldier shouted, "Where is the family of the dead person?" And I jumped from the chair and shouted back, "I am his family. I am the martyr's sister." They unloaded the truck, and the coffin began to fly from one hand to hand and shoulder to shoulder until it was suddenly in front of me. Oh, my beloved, where is the carpenter? Muhammad, where is the carpenter? I found him waiting next to me. I said, "Open the coffin, my brother. Pronounce Bismillah and open it." As he did, I pulled out the sharp blade, and then carefully and slowly, I cut the white bag in which he'd been placed. That's my brother. That's him. That's Ali. I opened his right eye, oh, darling brother, and turned his lips around to see his lovely teeth, as lovely as a string of pearls. I then pulled out the Palestinian flag, and I wrapped him in it. Oh, we high sword has descended from heaven, shaded by the full moon. Oh, we do not gloat our enemies. One wall has gone, but another remains. Oh, we high sword has descended from heaven, shaped by the full moon. Oh, we do not gloat our enemies. A brave youth has gone, but another remains. We turned towards the Ibrahimi mosque, and we all prayed. Ali was finally at peace. One day, not so long ago, Fathiya, now in her 70s, late 70s, got up from sleep in a very nervous mood. I asked, "What's the matter, Tuha?" She said, "I dreamt your father has married another woman, and I was going crazy." Poor mom, she still loves him, even 40 years some after his death, though she only lived with him for 8 years. My sister Shireen married a man who is the spitting image of my dad. She is also the one who inherited dad's white teeth. Lucky girl. My sister Suhair married an Englishman and called her son Ali Taha. My son Ali, she says, keeps Ali alive in my heart and makes me miss him each and every moment. So his name is Ali Taha Brown. My sister May says she was 8 months old when my father was killed. She said, I'm the one who dreams about him most. It's a weird feeling to be part of a human being whom I don't even know. It may be that I think like him, feel like him, have the same voice as him, but I'll never really know for certain. They tell me that I take after him, that he was a funny guy who loved life. I returned to Palestine too, like him, in order to be near him. He left us when I was still a little girl. I missed him, was confused and angry with him. I couldn't understand. How could I? But I forgave him, and I allowed myself to grieve for him. It didn't make me miss him any less, but at least now, I know one thing for sure, that Ali won't die. He can't, because as long as we exist, Ali does too. That's my aunt Suhaila was asking her about the title of the play, and she loves it.
وين بدي الاقي وين؟
تعرفيها الأغنية؟
بعرفها.
غني لي إياها يا عمتي.
أخاف عليك لا تروح وتسيبني محتارة وتخلي سري يبوح والسر للجارة وأفضل أنا وحدي أنوح والدنيا غدارة وما بنمشي يا علي ما تخافش يا علي.
ألاقي زيك
فين يا علي وانت بالعين والعندي يا علي يا كويني يا علي يا نسيني يا علي يا كويني يا علي يا نسيني يا علي عالعين يا علي يا علي علي.